The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval amphibious base in Coronado as Sarah Martinez stepped out of her rental car. The salty Pacific breeze carried the sound of waves crashing against the shore, mixing with the distant shouts of trainees running drills on the beach. At 26 years old, Sarah had already made a name for herself in military circles, but today she was about to make the biggest gamble of her career. Sarah had served 4 years as a Navy intelligence officer before transitioning to civilian life to pursue advanced degrees in both computer science and military strategy. Her academic achievements were impressive, but what set her apart was her unconventional approach to problem solving. While others followed established protocols, Sarah questioned everything, often finding innovative solutions that others had overlooked. The idea had started 6 months earlier during a classified briefing about special operations training efficiency. Sarah had been working as a contractor, analyzing data patterns in military training programs. The numbers told a disturbing story. Despite the legendary reputation of SEAL training, recent completion rates had been declining, and mission readiness metrics showed concerning trends. More troubling was the fact that some of the most physically imposing candidates were failing at higher rates than expected, while certain individuals who barely met minimum physical standards were excelling. Sarah spent weeks diving deeper into the data, cross-referencing psychological profiles, training methodologies, and performance outcomes. What she discovered challenged decades of conventional wisdom about special forces selection and training. The current system, while producing exceptional warriors, was also systematically overlooking individuals who possessed rare combinations of mental resilience, tactical creativity, and adaptive problem-solving skills. Her research led to a controversial hypothesis. Sarah believed that the traditional emphasis on raw physical prowess and aggressive competition was actually filtering out candidates who might excel in modern asymmetric warfare scenarios. She theorized that a more nuanced approach, incorporating elements of collaborative problem-solving and cognitive flexibility, could not only improve completion rates, but also produce more effective operators for 21st-century missions. The breakthrough came when Sarah analyzed performance data from actual combat deployments. The SEALs who received the highest commendations weren't necessarily those who had dominated every physical challenge during training. Instead, they were often individuals who had shown remarkable adaptability, creative thinking under pressure, and the ability to work effectively with diverse teams in complex environments. Armed with this data, Sarah developed a comprehensive proposal for a modified training protocol. Her approach maintained all the physical and mental rigor of traditional SEAL training, while incorporating new elements designed to identify and develop the cognitive skills that modern special operations demanded. The proposal was met with skepticism from military traditionalists, but it gained support from forward-thinking officers who recognized the evolving nature of warfare. The opportunity to test her theories came through an unexpected channel. Admiral James Harrison, a veteran of multiple SEAL deployments who now oversaw special operations training, had been quietly reviewing Sarah's research. Harrison had witnessed firsthand how warfare had evolved since his early days as a young operator. The enemies they faced today were sophisticated, adaptive, and often employed tactics that required unconventional responses. During a private meeting at the Pentagon, Harrison presented Sarah with an unprecedented opportunity. The Navy was prepared to allow her to undergo a modified version of SEAL training, not with the goal of becoming an operational team member, but to test her theories under the most demanding conditions possible. If her approach proved successful, it could revolutionize how the military selected and trained special operations personnel. There was one catch that made the challenge even more daunting. Sarah wouldn't just be tested against the standard SEAL training benchmarks. She would be required to attempt to break the course record for the most challenging phase of training, a record that had stood for 8 years and been set by someone who was now considered one of the most elite operators in SEAL history. The record holder was Marcus Thompson, A mountain of a man who stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and possessed what seemed like superhuman endurance. Thompson had completed the notorious Hell Week phase of training in record time while carrying extra weight to help struggling teammates. His performance had become legendary within SEAL circles, and many believed his records would never be broken. Sarah knew that accepting this challenge meant putting everything on the line. Success would validate her theories and potentially change how the military approached special operations training. Failure would not only end her consulting career but also reinforce the very stereotypes she was trying to challenge about who could succeed in elite military units. The decision to accept came during a sleepless night in her Arlington apartment as Sarah stared out at the Potomac River and considered the implications. She thought about all the capable individuals who had been overlooked by traditional selection processes and all the missions that might benefit from operators trained using more comprehensive criteria. The potential impact outweighed the personal risk. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself standing outside the SEAL training compound, about to formally request permission to attempt something that many would consider impossible. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was asking for the chance to prove that the very people who might mock her request were using an incomplete framework for identifying excellence. As she walked toward the entrance, Sarah carried with her not just determination, but a detailed understanding of exactly what she was up against. She had studied every aspect of the training protocol, analyzed the performance data of hundreds of previous candidates, and developed specific strategies for each phase of the challenge ahead. What the instructors didn't know was that Sarah's preparation had been as methodical and comprehensive as any military operation. The moment of truth arrived when she stood before a panel of instructors, many of them former SEALs who had dedicated their lives to maintaining the highest standards of their elite brotherhood. The skepticism in their eyes was unmistakable, but Sarah had faced doubters before. What mattered now was whether she could transform skepticism into respect through performance. The stage was set for a confrontation between traditional thinking and innovative approach, between established methods and untested theories. Sarah Martinez was about to discover whether her belief in a different kind of excellence could survive contact with one of the most demanding proving grounds in the world. The conference room fell silent as Sarah finished presenting her request to the panel of SEAL instructors. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a weathered veteran with 20 years of special operations experience, leaned back in his chair and exchanged glances with his colleagues. The silence stretched uncomfortably before he finally spoke. "Let me understand this correctly," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "You want us to let you attempt to break Marcus Thompson's record, and you think your theories about training methodology will somehow give you an advantage over candidates who've spent years preparing for this moment?" Senior Chief Petty Officer Williams, whose reputation for breaking down overconfident candidates was legendary, couldn't suppress a chuckle. "Ma'am, with all due respect, Thompson's record isn't just about physical performance. That man completed Hell Week while carrying extra gear for teammates who were struggling. He did it with stress fractures in both legs that he never reported. What you're proposing isn't just difficult. It's practically impossible for someone without years of specialized conditioning." Sarah had anticipated this reaction, but hearing the dismissiveness in their voices still stung. She maintained her composure and opened the folder containing her research data. "I understand your skepticism, and I respect Marcus Thompson's achievement, but I believe we may be measuring the wrong things when we evaluate potential for special operations success." Commander Peterson, the senior officer present, studied Sarah carefully. He had read her file and knew about her academic credentials and her work as a military contractor. Despite his initial skepticism, something about her quiet confidence intrigued him. "Explain what you mean by measuring the wrong things." Sarah seized the opportunity to present her case. She walked through her analysis of performance data, showing how traditional physical metrics often failed to predict success in actual combat situations. She explained how cognitive flexibility, adaptive problem-solving, and collaborative leadership often proved more valuable than raw strength or speed in modern asymmetric warfare scenarios. The current training system excels at identifying individuals who can endure extreme physical hardship, Sarah continued. But warfare has evolved. Today's special operations require operators who can think creatively under pressure, adapt quickly to changing situations, and work effectively with diverse partners in complex environments. Chief Rodriguez remained unconvinced. All that sounds good in theory, but Hell Week isn't about theory. It's about finding out who has what it takes when everything is falling apart around them. Thompson didn't set that record by thinking creatively. He set it by being tougher than anyone else. Sarah nodded respectfully. I'm not diminishing the importance of mental and physical toughness. I'm suggesting that there are different types of resilience, and we might be overlooking individuals who possess the exact qualities that modern missions demand. The debate continued for another hour, with instructors raising practical concerns about safety, liability, and the precedent that allowing a civilian contractor to attempt SEAL training might set. Sarah addressed each concern methodically, presenting documentation showing that she had maintained exceptional physical fitness through CrossFit training and distance running, and that she had already passed preliminary medical and psychological evaluations. The turning point came when Commander Peterson asked a question that caught everyone off guard. Assuming we were to approve this, which we haven't decided, how exactly do you plan to approach Thompson's record? Do you have a specific strategy, or are you just hoping that your theories will somehow translate into faster times? Sarah smiled for the first time during the meeting. This was the question she had been hoping for. I've spent months analyzing every aspect of Thompson's performance, along with the performance data of hundreds of other candidates. I've identified specific areas where alternative approaches might yield better results. She opened her laptop and displayed a detailed breakdown of Hell Week challenges. Traditional approaches emphasize individual endurance and competition between candidates. My analysis suggests that strategic collaboration, efficient resource management, and psychological pacing could potentially achieve better overall results. Chief Rodriguez leaned forward, his skepticism beginning to mix with curiosity. Give us an example. Sarah highlighted the notorious log PT exercise, where teams of 6 candidates must carry heavy logs through various challenges while being constantly harassed by instructors. Most teams approach this as a test of individual strength, with the strongest members trying to carry more weight. But the mathematics of load distribution, combined with psychological factors like team cohesion and strategic rest rotation, suggest that a different approach could be more effective. The room grew quiet as the instructors processed her analysis. Senior Chief Williams, who had personally supervised hundreds of Hell Week candidates, found himself reconsidering exercises he thought he understood completely. You're talking about game theory applied to military training. Exactly, Sarah replied. And that's just one example. I believe there are opportunities for improvement throughout the entire training sequence, but they require looking at the challenges from a different perspective. Commander Peterson made the decision that would change everything. We'll give you a chance, but with conditions. You'll undergo a modified version of the training that includes all the physical and mental challenges, but with additional safety protocols since you haven't completed the full SEAL pipeline. You'll have one attempt at Thompson's record, and if you fail to meet even the minimum standards, the experiment ends immediately. The conditions were more restrictive than Sarah had hoped, but she recognized that she was being offered something unprecedented. No civilian contractor had ever been given this opportunity, and the instructors were taking significant personal and professional risks by approving her request. Over the following 6 weeks, Sarah underwent intensive preparation under the supervision of the SEAL instructors. The physical conditioning was brutal, designed to simulate the demands she would face during the actual challenge. But what surprised the instructors was Sarah's systematic approach to every aspect of preparation. While other candidates typically focused on building raw strength and endurance, Sarah treated each training element as a problem to be solved. She studied the biomechanics of different carrying techniques, researched optimal nutrition strategies for sustained performance, and even analyzed weather patterns to predict how environmental conditions might affect her attempt. Chief Rodriguez, who had initially been the most skeptical, found himself increasingly intrigued by Sarah's methodology. During a particularly grueling training session, he watched her demonstrate a technique for distributing weight during log carries that he had never seen before. The technique wasn't necessarily better than traditional methods, but it was different, and it worked. "Where did you learn that?" Rodriguez asked after the session. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead and smiled. "I didn't learn it anywhere. I analyzed video footage of hundreds of log PT sessions, identified inefficiencies in how teams typically distribute weight, and developed a mathematical model for optimal load sharing. Then I tested variations until I found one that worked for my physical capabilities." It was this kind of analytical approach that began to win over even the most traditional instructors. Sarah wasn't trying to replace their methods. She was trying to optimize them using tools and perspectives that hadn't been available when those methods were developed. The night before her attempt, Sarah sat alone in the barracks, reviewing her notes one final time. She had pushed her body to limits she hadn't known existed, and her mind felt sharp and focused. But she also understood that no amount of preparation could guarantee success against a record that had stood for 8 years. The challenge ahead wasn't just about proving her theories or advancing her career. It was about demonstrating that excellence could take different forms, and that the military's definition of peak performance might need to evolve for the challenges of modern warfare. As dawn approached, Sarah felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. In a few hours, she would discover whether her belief in a different kind of strength could measure up against the legendary standard set by Marcus Thompson. The instructors who had once mocked her request were now watching with genuine interest to see what this unconventional candidate might achieve. The pre-dawn darkness over Coronado Beach was broken only by the harsh glare of floodlights illuminating the training course. Sarah stood at the starting line, her heart pounding as she surveyed the obstacles that had broken countless aspiring SEALs over the years. The instructors who had once dismissed her request now watched in silence, their clipboards ready to document what they expected would be an educational failure. Commander Peterson approached Sarah for the final briefing. "You understand the parameters. You have exactly the same time limit Thompson had, facing identical challenges under similar conditions. Weather is cooperating, tide conditions are optimal. No excuses, no special considerations." Sarah nodded, her focus already shifting into the analytical mindset that had carried her through weeks of preparation. She had studied every second of Thompson's record-setting performance, identifying not just what he had done, but why his approach had been so effective. More importantly, she had found opportunities for improvement that others had missed. The first challenge was the obstacle course, a brutal sequence of walls, crawls, and carries that had to be completed in full gear while carrying additional equipment. Thompson had attacked this section with raw power and determination, using his superior size and strength to overcome obstacles through sheer force. Sarah's approach was different. As the whistle blew, Sarah began her attempt with movements that looked almost casual compared to the explosive intensity typically seen from candidates. But her pace was deceptively efficient. While Thompson had powered over walls using upper body strength, Sarah employed techniques borrowed from rock climbing that allowed her to maintain speed while conserving energy. Her background in competitive athletics hadn't been in traditional strength sports, but in activities that required technical precision and strategic energy management. Chief Rodriguez watched through binoculars, tracking her progress against Thompson's recorded times. "She's actually ahead," he muttered, surprised by what he was seeing. Not by much, but she's ahead. The second phase involved water challenges that were designed to test candidates' ability to function under extreme stress while hypothermic and exhausted. This was where Thompson's legendary mental toughness had truly shown. He had powered through sections that left other candidates hypothermic and disoriented, maintaining focus and determination when his body was shutting down. Sarah's approach to the water challenges revealed the depth of her preparation. Instead of fighting the cold and exhaustion, she had trained her body to function efficiently under these exact conditions. Her breathing techniques, developed through months of cold water training, allowed her to maintain core temperature longer than typical candidates. More importantly, her analytical mindset remained sharp even as physical stress mounted. Where Thompson had relied on willpower to push through discomfort, Sarah used systematic strategies to minimize the impact of that discomfort. Her stroke techniques were optimized for efficiency rather than speed. Her pacing was mathematically calculated to prevent early burnout, and her mental approach treated each challenge as a problem to be solved rather than an ordeal to be endured. Senior Chief Williams found himself grudgingly impressed as Sarah emerged from a particularly brutal underwater obstacle course segment. Her time was not just competitive with Thompson's, it was better. "How is she doing this?" he asked Peterson, who was monitoring her vital signs through wireless sensors. "Heart rate is elevated but controlled," Peterson replied, studying the readouts. "Core temperature is holding steady. She's not just surviving these challenges, she's optimizing her performance through them." The third phase was where Sarah's theories faced their ultimate test. The team challenges required candidates to work together under extreme stress while being constantly harassed by instructors. Thompson had excelled here by becoming an inspirational leader, carrying extra weight for struggling teammates and driving everyone forward through force of personality. Sarah's approach was fundamentally different. Instead of trying to dominate through superior physical performance, she became a force multiplier for her temporary teammates. Her analytical skills allowed her to quickly identify each person's strengths and weaknesses, creating optimal team configurations for different challenges. Her communication was precise and encouraging, helping teammates perform better rather than simply carrying them. During the notorious log PT exercise, Sarah implemented the techniques she had developed during preparation. The results were remarkable. Her team moved faster and with less apparent effort than groups led by candidates with superior individual strength. She had turned the exercise into a demonstration of applied physics and psychology rather than a test of raw endurance. Chief Rodriguez was no longer hiding his amazement. "She's not just keeping up with Thompson's pace, she's beating it, and she's making it look almost easy." The fourth phase tested individual resilience through sleep deprivation, nutritional stress, and psychological pressure. This was where Thompson's mental toughness had been most evident. He had maintained performance standards even when his body was breaking down, driven by an almost superhuman refusal to quit. Sarah faced these same challenges with a completely different toolkit. Her preparation had included extensive research into the physiology of sleep deprivation and stress management. She used micro-recovery techniques during brief rest periods, optimized her nutrition intake for sustained energy, and employed mental strategies borrowed from endurance athletes and fighter pilots. Where Thompson had powered through fatigue, Sarah minimized its impact. Where Thompson had endured psychological pressure, Sarah reframed it as useful information about her mental state. Her approach wasn't about being tougher than the challenges, it was about being smarter than them. As the final hours approached, Sarah found herself in position to not just match Thompson's record, but to break it by a significant margin. The instructors who had initially mocked her request were now watching in stunned silence as she systematically dismantled assumptions about what peak performance looked like. Commander Peterson made a decision that would later be discussed in special operations circles for years. Instead of simply timing Sarah's performance against Thompson's record, he began documenting her techniques and strategies in detail. He realized that they weren't just witnessing an individual achievement, they were seeing a potential revolution in how special operations training could be approached. The final challenge was a solo endurance test that had to be completed while carrying full gear across varied terrain. Thompson had finished this section in a time that seemed almost superhuman, driven by determination that bordered on obsession. Sarah approached the same challenge with clinical precision. Her pacing was calculated to optimize performance over the full distance. Her carrying techniques distributed weight in ways that minimized fatigue. Her route selection showed an understanding of terrain that went beyond following the prescribed path. Every decision was informed by analysis and preparation rather than just willpower and determination. As Sarah crossed the finish line, the digital timer showed a result that silenced even the most skeptical instructors. She hadn't just broken Thompson's record, she had shattered it by a margin that seemed impossible. Her time was nearly 15% better than the previous record, achieved through methods that challenged fundamental assumptions about human performance under extreme stress. Chief Rodriguez approached Sarah as she collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. The man who had initially dismissed her theories now looked at her with genuine respect. "How?" was all he could manage to ask. Sarah smiled through her exhaustion. Thompson was an exceptional individual who maximized his potential using the tools and techniques available to him. I used different tools and techniques to maximize my different potential. His approach wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete. The implications of Sarah's achievement extended far beyond a simple training record. Her success demonstrated that excellence in special operations could be achieved through multiple pathways, and that cognitive flexibility and strategic thinking were just as valuable as traditional measures of toughness and determination. In the months that followed, Sarah's techniques were incorporated into SEAL training protocols. Her analytical approach to challenge optimization became a standard part of instructor training. Her theories about cognitive diversity in special operations selection led to changes in how candidates were evaluated and developed. Marcus Thompson, when he learned about the broken record, was among the first to congratulate Sarah. In a conversation that exemplified the evolution in special operations thinking, he told her that he wished he had access to her analytical tools during his own training. The man whose record had seemed unbreakable became one of the strongest advocates for the new approaches Sarah had pioneered. Sarah's achievement proved that questioning established methods wasn't about disrespecting tradition, it was about honoring excellence by constantly seeking better ways to achieve it. Her success opened doors for candidates who might have been overlooked by traditional selection processes, and her methodologies improved performance across the entire spectrum of special operations training. The woman who had once been mocked for asking, "May I try?" had not only earned permission to attempt the impossible, she had redefined what impossible meant in one of the most demanding environments in the world. Her legacy wasn't just a broken record. It was a transformed understanding of human potential and the many forms that excellence could take.